Some of your business stories now. Prime Biz begins right now, and usually at this time what do? We give you the chart of the day or the number of the day. Well, let's take a reveal and see what the chart of the day will tell us. And it is a chart, and anything that drops like this, believe me, is not a good story. Yeah, investors, I'm afraid, they're shell-shocked after the market witnessed a stunning crash today. Shares in the biggest retailer in Africa, Steinhoff, went into free fall and fell by more than 61%. And that's plunging from 45 Rand 64 a share to around 17 Rand 50. The company fell even further during the course of the day. This means that more than 130 billion Rand was wiped off the company's market capitalization or value in just one day. And 180 billion was wiped off of all of its related companies combined. Well, Steinhoff is a giant retailer that manages retail outlets such as Hifi Corporation and Timbercity. PEP as well as Ackermans were unbundled recently into a new company called Steinhoff African Retails, or STAR. Well, the core company has also become a global retail player through acquisitions across Europe and lags only behind the giant IKEA. Its shares listed in Frankfurt fell by more than 40% after the markets opened today. Today's meltdown comes after the board released a statement last night saying that the information relating to accounting irregularities had come to light. And to add to the bombshell, the CEO, Marcus Juster, has resigned, and so has the CEO of STAR. The release of the company's full-year results that was meant to take place today was delayed indefinitely, and the chair of the board, Christa Wiese, will now run the company on a temporary basis. He's the biggest shareholder in the company, and so he probably has the biggest headache to deal with today, as he's lost the most. And if the share price doesn't recover, it will also affect government pension funds that were invested in Steinhoff by the Public Investment Corporation. So this chart is not a great one if you're an investor and you're sitting with shares in some company called Steinhoff, because that drop happened in just one day. 61% of the value of something that you have in hand disappearing literally overnight. Well, to discuss this now, we're now joined on the line by Graeme Korner from Korner Perspective. Thank you very much for joining us on the program, Graeme. Have you ever seen anything like this in the time that you've been looking at the markets?
Well, memories were short, Peter, but yeah, offhand, I can't remember anything quite as violent as this. You know, obviously, globally, we've had the likes of Enron and the Lehmans of the world, but in my memory, I can't remember anything that was as violent as this. And I think, as you said in the introduction, you know, it's not only the 120 billion Rand market cap that was wiped off Steinhoff itself, but, you know, Star and PSG and Cup and Brait and ShopRite, everybody. It was a whole string of casualties. So you add it all up and you're coming to almost 200 billion Rands worth of value destruction today.
So what do we actually know about this, inverted commas, accounting irregularity?
Well, I think that's exactly the issue, Peter. We know very little. What we know is that it was serious enough for Marcus Juster to resign, and clearly, you know, I think, you know, when I say spare a thought for Christa Wiese, he has 23% of this, but it's more than that. He's obviously consolidated a lot of his wealth and his assets into the Marcus Juster stable. So I think we must just spare a thought for him, but also, of course, for all the employees of the government pension fund. You know, the PIC owns almost 10% of this. And of course, the other one that is important at the risk of diverting for a minute is Naspers, which itself has, over the last while, lost a fair amount of value. But yeah, I think just coming back to it, we know very little. What we know is that it was serious enough for the financial statements, which were due to be released today, to not be released. I think Marcus Juster was keen to push ahead, even though the auditors were not prepared to endorse them. And we also know that PwC, the accounting firm, has been tasked with uncovering exactly what it is. But at the moment, we know very, very little. And frankly, there's an old saying in the market that markets hate uncertainty more than bad news, because at least you can sort of say, well, bad news is going to cost us and we need to do a recapitalization of whatever. Here we just have absolutely no idea. And that's why, you know, from the opening, Steinhoff went into a volatility auction, lost over 60% of its value. It recovered a little bit. It looked to me as though it was gaining a little bit of composure and some buyers coming through. But unfortunately, I think it was just over 5.5 billion rands worth of trade, and most people were just panicking to get out. So at this stage, in answer to your question, we know very little. All we know is it was serious enough to cause Marcus Jooste to fall on his sword, and obviously this was serious enough for Christos himself to accept that resignation.
So now, we know accountants can massage the books and sort of move between year and year. Eventually it sort of balances out. But this has got to go beyond that, sort of almost getting to perhaps what people might even call illegal.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the issue, that I think the suspicions are that there was off-balance sheet transactions which were either masking losses or inflating the profits, or both. And I think that's really the issue. So I don't think it's really about, did they count 11 beds sold when they actually sold 10. I think it's more around, off-balance sheet and how you were treating, loans, and how you were handling some sort of technical accounting issues as opposed to the operations. Because I think that was the thing, when I was driving earlier this evening, ultimately in the U.S., mattress firm will sell mattresses today. People were shopping at PEPs today. The business continues, but unfortunately, if there are massive accounting sort of irregularities or falsehoods, they can effectively negate the efforts of thousands and thousands of employees. And I think that's also the other important thing here, is it's not just the shareholders who suffer in times like these, but it's also the employees. But yeah, at this stage, we know very, very little. I think all we know is that it's serious.
So if, for example, that they can ride this storm and that it was an irregular accounting thing, but the businesses themselves are pretty solid, surely the share price at some point has to recover to reflect the soundness of a business.
Well, I think that's the key question. And unfortunately, in a way, it came at a really terrible time because, world markets over the last couple of days are suddenly, the butterflies are no longer flying in formation. There's a lot of angst around. You see copper come off. You see the likes of Nasdaq and some of the tech shares around the world. Just generally, there's a lot more angst. So I think also ahead of the elected conference in South Africa, a lot of investors reluctant to commit capital. So it was a case of very aggressive sellers, people sort of just saying, I want nothing to do with this. And where you would normally logically find buyers coming in, between the uncertainty and an unwillingness to commit to the SA Incorporated story, I think it was just absolutely smashed. So that's why, Peter, I thought earlier today, when it sort of broke through 20 Rand, 22 Rand, 24 Rand, it was looking, this was earlier in the morning, as though the buyers were coming back. But, as they dribbled into the market, they were met with some very aggressive selling. Some of that might have been, short selling, some people sort of betting on the fact that this thing is going to be game over. But I tend to agree with you. There are underlying businesses, If you look at Steinhoff Africa, for example, Retail Africa, you look at PSG, there are real properties, there are businesses in there. Let's not forget, we talk about, Ackermans and PEP and Hifi Corporation in South Africa, but effectively Steinhoff is a global company. It burns, let's call it less than 20% or roughly 20% of its profits in South Africa. It is now, second only to IKEA. So, it's not as though it operates on a shoestring and bubblegum. This is a real business with really big turnovers and a lot of complexities.
All right, Graeme, this is a story that's going to run for a couple of days, if not longer. But thanks very much for your insights today. I'm sure we're going to have to catch up with you again in a couple of days' time.